Welcome to day 69. We are looking at Deuteronomy chapters 13 to 15 today and Galatians chapter 1. So in Deuteronomy, remember this is Moses giving kind of a big final sermon, preaching of how people are supposed to live as one final wrap up of all of God's messages before Moses passes away and the people enter the promised land. So, as we go through this today, there's going to be some stuff that sounds familiar to stuff we've already heard in Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. And you're not imagining things, there is a bunch of stuff that is repeated. Remember that all of these texts had different authors, different sources, different editors before it was all put together into the final 5 books of Moses, 5 books of instruction that we know of today. So we start with some instructions on staying faithful to God and not being led astray by others. Now, when we get to Galatians, we're going to see the same type of theme coming from Paul to the early Christians. So whether it is the Israelites who are meeting new neighbors and learning about new religious practices in the area of Canaan, what we call Israel today, or whether it is the Christians living in Galatia, which is part of what we call Turkey today, there have always been other leaders who have come to try to distract people and suggest other ways of living that go in a different direction from what God's intention was. So we are reminded once again to stay faithful to God and not be led astray. Chapter 14, we get some of the dietary guidelines that are the basis for the kosher diets tradition that many of us know of today. Now, keep in mind here that God in the book of Acts gave Peter a vision about food and that all the animals that God had created were clean and could be eaten by Peter. But the guidelines here don't try to come up with some, logical reason for it. The purpose here was God wanted his people to be set aside, for them to behave differently so that other people knew that these were people who followed the way of God, that they could be a testimony, a witness to God's beliefs, God's love to the people around them. And so this is more a way of showing which God people are following by following these dietary guidelines. The rest of our Deuteronomy reading goes into God's economic system. And it's really kind of interesting to read, especially given some of the dynamics that are going on in the world today with some major income and wealth uh, inequality of some people having vast amounts and a lot of people having very little. So we are once again reminded of the 10% tithe, and that in the third year, your tithe should be put into savings so that you can help others. In the seventh year, all debts were to be canceled. This would be a truly radical thing for the United States to be living with. You should always have something that you can give to people in need, that you should be giving freely and spontaneously, and that if you have Hebrew people who've become your slaves during the 7 years, they are to be set free on the seventh year, and there's some additional information on that. It is really hard when we are so used to the political and economic system that we live within to really think about organizing things in a different way. Not all countries in the world have the same economic system or political system. And sometimes there are systems that have some wisdom in it in other parts of the world that we might be able to learn from something from. I think one of the biggest takeaways from looking at God's economic system in this section is that not everything we have is ours. God has blessed people, and some people end up with more than others, but God's economic system has a kind of a relief valve in it, that if everyone takes part of what they have and sets aside to be able to share with others, then everyone in the community will have enough. So it's not that everyone gets the same amount, and it's not that everyone has the same stuff, because we know that's just not how the world works, no matter how you look at it. Some people are stronger than others. Some people live on land that is more productive than others. But the idea here is that of everything you have, some of it set aside to be able to share with others. And I think there is a lot of wisdom in this. And I think it is something for us to think about as we consider our own personal budgets and as we consider the ways that we work together through the church and through nonprofits and through our governments to be able to collect some of our resources to be able to share them so that everyone has enough. Looking at Galatians, there are many who consider this to be the oldest of the New Testament documents, of the letters that we currently have. There may well have been letters written before that, but we don't have any copies of them. This was written before the Gospels were written down. I love the traditional greeting that Paul has here, grace and peace. I wonder sometimes if we greeted each other with grace and peace more often, what our world would look like today. Uh, just like in Deuteronomy, Paul is reminding people to stick with God's message, don't wander, don't get distracted. And then Paul points out that his conversion story from being someone who persecuted the early Christians to becoming one of them who is sharing the story of Jesus was a really powerful testimony, and that many people had been brought to know Jesus and love Jesus and follow Jesus because of Paul's story and his willingness to share his story. And so this is one thing that I think is a big question for us today. First of all, what is our story? Each one of us has our own story of journeying with Jesus. What is your story? I encourage you to take a few minutes and just jot it down. It doesn't have to be long and complicated, but what are some of the highlights of the moments that you have been with God and come to know and understand God in new ways? Um, the twists and turns that we take in our own journey can often be a very important witness and testimony to other people. And as we see with Paul, I think God really wants us to know our story, to claim Jesus as our own, and be willing to share that with others. So if you'd like more information on this, just reach out to me and I'd be happy to help you make up some little short videos that you can share on social media or share with our faith community during worship. Have a great day as you think about the ways that you are walking with Jesus in your life today. We'll see you next time.